Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Thanks so much for being here. I appreciate it. I had a week off. I am rejuvenated for this next metallics pour. I realized as I was making my colors, this is like an Olympic themed pour because we have gold, we have silver, we have bronze. Not bronze, it's copper, but close enough for my Olympic theme. So stay tuned for the rest and we'll see how it shakes out. Alright, and with this particular pour, I wanted to keep all of my colors apart, but also my patterns symmetrical. So I kept my copper in the corners, going into my iridescent silver, in between my four coppers, as you can see, a bit of a diamond shape with my silver, leading into some gold by Amsterdam. My colors are a soft-bodied acrylic by Liquitex, being the silver and the gold, and the copper is by Amsterdam. Now with these iridescent colors by Liquitex, I used the soft body for the first time, and let me tell you, it mixes incredibly smooth and very liquid. So in comparison to my copper, which is Amsterdam, I mixed that one the morning of this pour, so about 8 hours beforehand, and it was much more thick than the soft-bodied colors by Liquitex. So nothing bad or good, just different. And I found myself having to play with the ratios quite a bit to make sure that each paint was close. And in having said that, this black is the Oxide Black by Amsterdam as well. And it was way more thin than the rest, like by a country mile. So I had to be careful with all my colors where I wanted them, but also keeping in mind that some were way more liquid than the others, especially the black. So when you're pouring, when you're mixing, be mindful of the ratios, but also consistency to make them as close as possible. Okay, and here's a funny story of this particular pour and what went wrong. So nothing went wrong per se. I actually had a different plan in mind altogether for the type of pour, and I wanted to make a stacked cup of metallics for the sake of something different and a bit more unique for my channel. I don't make a lot of straight cups for myself or stack cups, but I realized that this canvas was 16 by 20 and needed around 17 total ounces of paint to just create a piece. Now, I didn't have a cup big enough to hold in and around 12 to 15 ounces at all in one cup. And I didn't want to split it into two because my pattern may have come out not like I wanted it to, so I decided to go against my first intuition in making the stacked or straight cup and decided on a puddle pour instead, which turns out really kind of cool. These iridescents really surprised me with the outcome, and the combination of the black as well was a really cool accent, making sure that we got some, a bit more darkness into those metallics. Okay, now with these particular colors by Liquitex, the soft-bodied version, I'm curious if anyone has used them or may use them more often than me, because as I see this video back, when I was finished this piece, I was like, whoa, look at that cool pattern in each puddle that is kind of circular. Now, whether it's a combination of my pouring medium with, I use Artist Loft pouring medium and also half and half Floetrol. So that's my pouring medium I use week to week. And whether it's the Floetrol in combination with the medium or just the way these paints mix, I'm curious what your guys' experience may be with a softer bodied metallic by Liquitex specifically, or if it could just be the way I mix my paint. So if you have an opinion, let me know below in the comments and we can chat about it. Now, as I wrap up my puddles here, do not ever forget to torch metallic paint. I had to mix the copper, like I mentioned, the morning of this pour because my technique idea was just out the window. Just to pop your bubbles before moving on to your next steps. So with my next steps is one of my favorites in wrecking my puddles. just to ensure that all my colors kind of touch and create a separation from silver, gold, and copper into a bit of a blend of each particular puddle. Now, I love this particular method because A, it's in my brain, it's soothing and helps me to calm down, and also too makes a really nice pattern generate. I'm going to swipe through these in a minute, but I found that in the end, you could swipe through it or leave it as is and just begin tilting to create whatever pattern you want. But I found that for me, I love the swipes myself, but in this pattern, as you can see, you could just go ahead and tilt it off and see what happens. Okay, and as for the swipes, they went really, really well. I only did 2 swipes, which was plenty for this particular piece because there was lots of composition with my breaking of the puddles in the pour itself. So, and the second swipe goes equally as well as the first. And in terms of cell activator, my ratios for my activator are 1 part titanium white Amsterdam paint with 2 parts Australian Floetrol to create my cells in any painting I make. I find that the thinner the cell activator for me, the better for the painting. So it creates lots of lacing and cool effects, especially in metallics. Now, I did mix this black paint, which is super thin, super thin, prior because of, again, I had to change my method of how I wanted to pour in the first place, and I'm going to lose all this black for the most part on purpose through my tilt. So I'm not going to be concerned with the black falling off the sides because I don't want it in the first place. So here we go with my corners and we'll see what I make. Okay, and here is my learning opportunity of the week. So with all of my pours, I tend to have all my paints be the same consistency because I find for me, depending on my swipe or my whatever I make that week, swipes typically, the same type of consistency works best for the pour. Now, when I mix this black, the black I don't care about because it'll fall off the side. It was way more thin, like probably a half the consistency in terms of liquid. It was really fluid compared to the rest. Now, one thing I didn't bank on is the fact that because it was so thin, it actually bled a little into the color, which will happen during the course of these tilts. So keep in mind, I guess going forward, if you plan to have any paint you want to have fall off, make it a little bit closer to the consistency of your other paint than I did. Again, this is really thin and it fell into my colors, which in the end made it, I guess, helped to make it more pretty than it could have been had I not. So anyway, observationally for me, that is my lesson of the week, is to just mix your paint as you would from front to back on all your colors, whether it's 3 or 4 or 5. I had 3 of the same and the 4th was way more thinner than the rest. Now, getting into the last couple corners of my tilts, I was really happy with how this painting was turning out. The fact I only swiped through twice, I think was to my benefit because it helped to maintain the, again, that cool kind of consistency with my puddles on the outside and some of the inside that I mentioned before of how I may mix my paints. And also the lacing does react a bit differently than it would with a solid color with metallics than your plain Jane solid color. So I found that this was working really well for me and I was really happy with how things were going from the beginning through the end. And no, I think, in some cases we tend to overdo it, or at least I do sometimes in terms of swipes, but in this case 2 was plenty. And one other thing is to just quickly mention, when you're tilting your corners, be sure to recenter your paint before going to the 3rd and 4th corner of your painting, just to ensure your paint is in the middle before going off any corners. Now, wrapping up this last corner on these tilts, I decided to, on at least one of the sides there, leave a bit of black. Of the outside black, I decided to dump off the sides on purpose for a bit of contrast because of my small little 4 dots of black I had in the middle, which created some, some consistency and just general, better feel throughout the entire piece, being on the outsides, but also on the insides as well. So I decided to keep some, which worked out in the long run. Okay, now as I finish up here with my recentering of the pattern, I'm really quite happy with this particular pour. As we go into front overhead look, the lacing effects that were made in the gold and copper, I think really make this piece work. And of course, the composition in the blends of paint we talked about before, in the composition of those puddles, I think really helped to create two dynamic, viewpoints of this pour, whether it's the puddles being broken or the lacing effects as a particular point of interest. Overall, the pour turned out great. So what do you think? Let me know below in the comments section. I've been curious to see what you think, and we will catch you again in the next one.